Episode 1 of Hulu's docuseries 1619 is entitled Democracy. The major talking points in this episode are centered around the major contributions and influence of African slaves and later the descendants of African slaves toward the development of the United States. This episode chronicles African Americans' fight to foremost be treated as human beings and then recognized as citizens. They wanted access to rights granted to citizens of a democratic nation, and since landing here 400 years ago, they have been fighting for freedom and justice for themselves, for fair and equal treatment, and access to unalienable rights. I'm only going to provide a synopsis because I want you to watch the docuseries for yourself. I don't want to give too much away, and there are some facts that I was surprised to learn about, and I want you to possibly experience that surprise as well. Moreover, some of the information shared has clearly been recognized as fact by historians, but has been hidden nonetheless. If you choose to watch the docuseries, I hope that you remain engaged and periodically ask yourself why this information is not more widespread. Furthermore, why has there been a staunch campaign by political leaders to ban this information from schools? The episode begins with the Black experience on the plantation. It moves into Black contributions and influence during the Revolutionary War, Black influence on the 13th through 15th Amendments, and then into the Reconstruction era. Viewers learn how, over the next 25 years, Jim Crow would be ushered in. We learn how ruthlessly Southern whites would work to disenfranchise Black people, specifically Black men. They would use extreme violence, organize mobs, participate in massacres, and perpetuate widespread lynchings. Successful Black people who refused to submit to a lesser status would be targeted. The episode transitions to SNCC and their role in the Civil Rights era. It recounts the opposition and terror they endured to register Blacks to vote. It serves as an arc for the creation of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which blocked discriminatory voting policies before they could harm voters. This law would be overturned in 2013 and would place the burden of proving discrimination occurred onto voters themselves. It's interesting that this change occurred shortly after President Obama's second term in office, when the nation was having serious conversations about whether we are a post-racial society. Do you all think that we are living in a post-racial society? The Supreme Court would argue that the country has made great strides and that a voting act was no longer needed. Shortly thereafter, a precedent would be set on voter suppression laws. In 2021, 19 states passed 34 laws restricting access to voting. More than 440 bills with provisions that restrict voting access were introduced in 49 states during the 2021 legislative sessions. At any time, a law that has once protected your access to constitutional rights may be annulled. If you stop fighting, you may just find yourself defeated and denied that right. The episode wraps with a present-day examination of the health of our democracy. Two political scientists argue that our democracy is backsliding. They discuss the 4 warning signs that there is an imminent threat to a democracy. When you learn what the 4 signs are, you may decide that they are fitting of a particularly brash politician. In closing, this was a great episode that informs about the impact that African Americans have had on the United States. The legacy of African Americans is undoubtedly intertwined with the foundation of this country. As stated in this episode, African Americans have long challenged this country to live up to its democratic principles. The plight of African Americans has long been hidden and downplayed, but thanks to projects like the 1619 Project, the truth is finally coming to light.